This is The Guardian.
More than 20 years ago, a professor of plant sciences was featured on the front cover of Time magazine among lots of greenery with the caption, "This rice could save 1 million kids a year." He had managed to genetically modify rice to contain beta-carotene, a precursor to vitamin A. Up to 500,000 children become blind each year from vitamin A deficiency, and half of those die within 12 months of losing their sight.
It's the leading cause of blindness in the world. Get them vitamin A is the argument, and you will save lives and stop blindness.
It was an exciting discovery, but not everyone was impressed. Some green organisations and farmers, among others, claimed it could be a Trojan horse for other genetically modified plants and raised concerns about the impact it could have on other rice crops and the role of private companies in agriculture. So began a decades-long spat.
You've got a hero here, which are these scientists and their golden rice, and you've got a villain, which they like to point to Greenpeace. So it makes for a good story.
But is it as simple as the scientists versus the green groups? As this debate rears its head once again, with a court in the Philippines recently banning the commercial growth of golden rice, we're taking a look at the story and asking, why has it taken so long for this potentially life-saving technology to reach the fields? Is it really the silver bullet so many had hoped for? And now it's been banned. Is that the end of the story? I'm The Guardian's science editor, Ian Sample, and this is Science Weekly.
This goes back to the 1990s when the birth of genetic manipulation of crops was beginning. And two scientists, Peter Baer at Freiburg University and Ingo Petraikas at Institute of Plant Sciences in Switzerland, got together and decided the technology was ideal for tackling the issue of vitamin A deficiency.
That's Robin McKie, the Observer's Science and Environment editor.
Vitamin A deficiency is not a problem in the West. We get our calories from sources that have quite a lot of vitamin A in them, so it's not a problem. In Asia, much of the calories that are consumed come from white rice, which lacks vitamin A. So they experimented various things, found a way of putting genes for beta-carotene into the rice, the white rice, into the right place in the rice.
Rice plants already contained beta-carotene, the stuff our bodies convert into vitamin A, just not in the part we eat. After years of work in 1999, Petraikas and Bayer finally managed it. But despite their success, this was just the beginning.
It also turned the rice orange, and that led to the name golden rice, which has been developed and is being booted around the world for the last 20 years as people try to get it regulated and grown in Asia.
So, with the promise that this rice could help in tackling a serious public health issue, scientists continued working on the prototypes at the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, one of the world's most important rice-breeding organizations, together with PhilRice, the Philippine government's Rice Research Institute. This was a lengthy and challenging undertaking. Even when you've done all the genetic editing, you have to wait for your plants to grow to see if it's worked the way you'd planned. But eventually, they hit on productive crops with enough beta-carotene to provide sufficient vitamin A. In 2018, golden rice was declared safe for consumption by Canada's Government Department for Health Policy and the US Food and Drug Administration. It seemed as if the decades-long bet on golden rice was finally paying off.
It has been passed in many countries as safe. In other words, what you eat won't harm you. Eventually, the Philippines got round to giving the go-ahead for its commercial cultivation in 2021, and some of it has actually been grown there, about 100 tonnes, enough to start thinking about getting seeds from this and using it as the basis of actually widespread cultivation. It was preparing for that, and then a coalition of Greenpeace and local farmers went to the Court of Appeal there and said, no, we don't think this is safe.
In April this year, the Philippine Court of Appeals revoked the permit, concluding that in the absence of a scientific consensus on the human and environmental safety of golden rice, it should not be commercially cultivated. Field testing has also been banned until the government comes up with an approved way to monitor the safety of the crop.
The decision by the court was hailed as a monumental win by Greenpeace. On the other hand, Professor Martin Quam of Bonn University and a member of the Golden Rice Humanitarian Board called it a catastrophe that could result in the thousands and thousands of children dying. So you can see there's a deep division between these two groups.
So for now, golden rice has stalled again. But while the scientists involved are frustrated that Greenpeace's campaign has put their efforts on pause, others argue that it wasn't ready anyway.
It has taken a long time for them to develop this. It's still not quite ready yet. It makes for a good story. It can develop some exasperation, like what's wrong with these Greenpeace people? They've sort of lost their way. When in fact, Greenpeace hasn't been a major problem in the delay of golden rice. It's been more the biotech and the breeding.
That's Glenn Stone, a research professor of environmental science at Sweet Briar College in Virginia and an anthropologist who studied golden rice and rice production in the Philippines. Even if Greenpeace aren't behind the 20-year delay, they are responsible for the latest stumbling block in golden rice's journey to people's plates. So what are their objections, and how did they convince the court?
I think that organizations like Greenpeace and the Philippine organization Masipag, which has been really the leader in fighting golden rice, have got a long list of objections to it. And I think that when they go to the courts, they use the objections that will have traction with the court. They might have other much more profound philosophical objections that just wouldn't have traction with the court, so they wouldn't raise them. But the court was receptive to the argument that this might be environmentally damaging, so that's the argument that they went with. I personally am not convinced that that's a particularly compelling argument. I have yet to see any evidence that leads me to believe that golden rice might pose environmental problems, but it seems to have worked with the court.
But putting the court case and issues of harm aside, Glenn thinks there are other questions golden rice still has to answer.
You have to realize that when people talk about golden rice, you oftentimes get the idea that rice is rice and it's either golden or it's not, which is wildly inaccurate, especially for the Philippines, where there are literally thousands of different varieties of rice. And subsistence farmers have to select varieties that grow well in local conditions. And commercial farmers select things that are going to be profitable for them to grow. And of all these thousands of types of rice, the golden trait is in a kind of rice called RC82, which was a popular kind of rice back around 2002 when they started to do the work on it. But now it's an obsolete variety. And so it's unclear who would actually want to adopt this RC82 that has got the golden trait in it. Farmers are highly unlikely to plant on their own unless it's given to them for free.
And another aspect of this that you've written about is whether or not the beta-carotene in the rice can actually be converted into vitamin A in the communities where malnutrition is a big issue. Take us through that. What are your concerns there?
Well, the concerns there are that this rice has never been tested in the target population. The only study that is cited to show that beta-carotene would be turned into vitamin A was done with kids in China who were largely healthy and who were fed a good diet. So it really only demonstrated that golden rice works in kids who don't need it. Severe vitamin A deficiency occurs in kids who always have got other nutritional problems and frequently have gut infections and frequently have gut worms. And all of those things would affect the process of beta-carotene being converted into vitamin A. It would be a wonderful thing to study, but it has not been studied yet.
So it's not just about adding this one thing to a child's diet. There are lots of other things which will determine whether or not vitamin A can be absorbed. But then another issue is storage, right? Explain a little bit about that.
There was a study done several years ago that found that the beta-carotene levels in golden rice do decay relatively quickly unless the rice is stored under really ideal conditions. One of the things you have to realize is that a lot, perhaps the majority of the kids in the Philippines who suffer from vitamin A deficiency live in families that don't even grow rice. About half the kids who have got this malady live in urban areas. And a lot of them also live in mountainous areas where nobody's going to be planting this kind of golden rice, which is bred into a lowland variety. So the only way they're going to get golden rice is if commercial growers adopt it and grow it and it's available in the markets. That means that how it's been stored from the time it's harvested and shipped to market is going to have a big impact on whether or not the rice even has the beta carotene that's viable anymore.
So there are questions that still need to be addressed, but plenty of scientists see golden rice as a promising tool in the fight against malnutrition that once it gets going would be a far cheaper option than other interventions. Then again, others point out that the Philippines have already made pretty significant inroads into tackling vitamin A deficiency through these more traditional nutrition programs. What are your thoughts on that? What are they doing that's working already?
They've done a lot that's worked very well. The Philippines passed a law several years ago called the First 1,000 Days Act, which provided a lot of funding, which boosted programs they already had in place to try to deal with nutrient deficiencies. And they've been able to reach a very large number of kids with micronutrient supplementation programs. And also with medicine, they help them have healthier guts so that they can absorb vitamins better. Also, breastfeeding is a major source of vitamin A for young infants. And so there's a lot that could be done that would probably improve the vitamin A problem by having programs that promote breastfeeding and increased maternity leave and supporting breastfeeding at work and so forth. So in short, there's a lot that has been done. They have sharply reduced the rate of vitamin A deficiency over the many decades that they've been working on golden rice.
You've studied this for a while, Glenn. I mean, what would you really like to see happen next in this whole saga?
I don't have any problem with golden rice being released. I don't completely share the concerns that have been raised about genetic erosion and things like that. It would delight me if it were effective. I just have got reasons to be doubtful in it. What I would really like most, I think, is for people who are involved with this, and that includes the scientists, the economists who study it, and also the journalists who write about it, to be a little bit more objective about it. It makes for a good, juicy story if you can have a villain in it. So you've got a hero here, which are these scientists and their golden rice, and you've got a villain, which they like to point to Greenpeace. So it makes for a good story. And the disagreements are unfortunate because they've steered away from the science.
So what's likely to happen next? Answering the questions Glenn raised means running more studies and, crucially, planting crops again, which takes us back to the recent court decision in the Philippines. Robin McKie.
The government will appeal. They probably will win it. There's a lot standing on this. But on the other hand, it's going to be even more controversial when they started trying to put it out into the environment, into fields. Who knows how well it will be accepted. In addition, countries like India and Bangladesh, who have got similar problems with vitamin A deficiency, will be looking at this and going, I wonder if it's worth all the hassle. So things are very much up in the air, I would say, for golden rice.
Having reported on the twists and turns of this saga, Robin reflected on how science, politics, ideology, and society have all collided over golden rice.
The whole GM issues began because people and green groups, I think very legitimately said, well, wait a minute, let's not just rush into this. There must be safety concerns. Should we be doing this? And who's it actually benefiting? There was nothing, seemed to be nothing in it for the actual consumer. So they turned against GM flatly. And I don't think that's the right response. I think you should look at GM with care and suspicion. But when it produces a particular product that has been shown to be safe and has the potential to save children's lives, then it should be given a chance. And Philippines was on, it was on the door of doing that. And I just hope it hasn't been shut, that door.
My thanks to both Professor Glenn Stone and Robin McKie. And that's it for today. This episode was produced by Madeline Finley. It was sound designed by Tony Onochukwu. And the executive producer is Ellie Bury. We'll be back on Tuesday. See you then.
Hi, I'm Archie Bland, editor of The Guardian's Election Edition newsletter. Every weekday evening, I'll be guiding you through the twists and turns of the campaign in an extra election episode of Today in Focus. To listen, subscribe to Today in Focus wherever you get your podcasts. And don't worry, all of this will be over in a month.